Hey everyone, welcome to my channel's Bookers and Purrs. My name's Leslie, um, where I discuss all things books. I sometimes have a cat next to me, but they're in the other room. Today we're going to discuss the top 5 moments from Interview with a Vampire, Season 2, Episode 7, I Could Not Prevent It, which was such a loaded title. Once again, I could talk about this entire episode and the whole idea behind top 5 moments is just like keeping me on track instead of making this like super duper long video. Um, so even calling this top 5 moments is pretty loaded. So this is also going to be a bit of an abstract discussion for top 5 because I just couldn't help myself but kind of like go there, I guess. So here we go. All right. So the first top 5 moment is the evolution of the yellow dress. Uh this is I'm trying to like get it out because it's like so emotional. Um First of all, the middle photo is when Madeline and Claudia are putting together the dress. Um and the photo to the what should I say? To the right is Madeline's uh, vision that Louis and Claudia see when they're draining her, and flanked all the way to the left is what Claudia ends up wearing. And so I just found the evolution of the dress, where it is in the reality of the show, where Madeline wanted it to be, the construction of it with both those two characters together to be symbolic of like a couple of things. One, symbolic of Claudia, and symbolic of her companion, right? So Claudia is someone that was made into a vampire when she was young, like too soon. She didn't get a chance to fully develop as a physical in a physical human form, right? Um, and also she's someone that died as a vampire very young. And both of those things happen in a non-consensual way, which is something that has really marred Claudia's character, right? As far as being made, taken out of the world, also being assaulted. So there's all these different developments of Claudia and lack of consent that go on. But also, when you look at this, we have to think about Claudia's companion and how um, ultimately, you know what? Okay, let me back up a little bit. Let's talk about Madeline, the character in the books versus the show. In the books, Claudia was like a 5-year-old, 4-year old, something like she's a toddler, and her companion ends up being a woman in a dress. No, not a dress. Sorry, a woman that makes dolls because Lestat loved buying Claudia dolls. It doesn't matter how much time has passed by, and Claudia is fed up with it. He's always buying her dolls. And so that's the companion that Claudia ends up finding in Paris. And her companion in Paris is someone that had also lost a toddler. So she sees that Claudia is this eternal child, and that's something that she wants because she doesn't ever want to have to lose a child again. And so that's also symbolic, right? With not just Claudia as a character in the books, always being perceived as this doll-like child, even though she's not, and that's like really at the frustration of her in the books. But then you have like this mother figure, and in a way, still not seeing like I almost felt like still not really seeing who she is, right? We're seeing her as an eternal child. And what was adapted and I think made better is making Madeline um a dressmaker. Sorry, I'm trying to get it out. I'm still reeling from this episode. Um and in making her a dressmaker, what does a dressmaker have to do, right? They have to look at something and they have to see the vision of where they want um their constructed design to go. And so when they meet each other, Madeline is very dismissive. They have like this kind of like back and forth uh, banter, but through that, Madeline actually sees Claudia who she really is. She knows something's up with her. Time has passed by and her body hasn't changed, but her eyes look like the windows. It's something that Madeline says. And just through spending time to like bonding together through conversations, Madeline starts to envision really who she really sees Claudia as, right? In a way, like seeing Claudia's soul. And so even when Madeline goes to see Claudia in a theatrical performance, you could tell she's not okay. She does not like this performance and what Claudia is made to do. She even says to Claudia after that, she goes, "Okay, whatever that was," because she's just like, "This is not you." Um, And so, yeah, so I definitely feel like this dress is a reflection of all this, that it's also symbolic of their relationship. It only got to go so far and it was cut short. And so yeah, I find that really beautiful and tragic because you could even see like even in the vision of Claudia, there's like a blue collar that we never even saw in the fitting. And there's that little added, I don't know what we want to call it that. I'll call it ribbon. I don't know. I'm not a seamstress or a fashion person, but like that none of that ever gets added. It never gets to where they wanted it to be, both of them for Claudia and Madeline. And so, yeah, that's just terribly, terribly depressing. All right, so moving on. um, this is I have I don't there's so much I want to talk about. I don't know where to start. So there's a moment two, I'll say like one of the top 5 moments is what is real, and also basically what I'm gonna talk about is just, like, the gaslighting of different characters upon the viewer, really, um, because that first watch for me just had me so distraught, and I watched it one other time fully, and then after that, I didn't, but I did go this whole week from Sunday when the episode released until now it's Friday. Like, usually I make my videos draft them on a Tuesday and edit by a Wednesday, and I just couldn't do it. Yeah. So I've been watching a bunch of other people's takes just for my own sanity, and so flanked on the right of the screen, you're gonna see Vampire Chronicles from Instagram. I took that shot from them, and also I wanted to give credit to Black Girl Talks Fangs. I think she also shared something, but it was on her stories on Instagram. And I couldn't find it. I could have sworn it was their account, and they also have a Discord, but, because there's something that I noticed, and I can't remember. I think it was, like, on my 2nd watch, but I thought maybe I was wrong until I saw other people posting about it. But anyways, I'll get there. Get ready because I'm about to be all over the place. And that is, um you know what? We'll start here. I'm like, where do I even go with this? When we're watching the trial, Sam, the vampire, is supposedly like bodyguarding Armand, right? But what I didn't understand is later on, kind of quickly, we see Sam, and I thought, I don't know if I'm getting vampires mixed up because I'm not paying attention to like how many there are or all of them, but I could have sworn it was the same vampire. So Sam is watching Armand, but then Sam is also the one that takes Louis away and puts him um one of the vampires, right? That puts him in the coffin. And so I kind of thought, okay, which one is it? Did he do his vampire? Let me move fast because he can't do both, right? Or did he, I don't know, do his vampire quickly move? I don't know. It just didn't make any sense. So I feel like Sam guarding Armand, I feel like that might be what do you call it? A hallucination that Armand placed there maybe later. Or I don't know how his power works. I don't know if he did it at the time when the trial was going on. I don't fully know how his powers work. And so either way, that was like a tip off that this whole scenario doesn't make sense. I think Armand, with his powers has really messed with Louis. But also we see a moment where Armand finishes the dialogue of Louis, which is what we saw in what, like the second episode of this season, where Louis will say something, and then when Armand agrees to be a part of this whole interview, finishes his sentence. And it's one of those like obnoxiously cute moments in a relationship. But now, as time goes on, we see that's actually a nefarious sign that maybe it's not really about that. Maybe it's not about them being in sync. It's about what has Armand done to Louis to get to that place to make it happen. And so he's having a moment where Louis is talking about how Lestat's nature, which I actually did agree with, of just being genuinely apologetic and then doing something terrible and like that pattern. And that's where Armand comes in and says something like, until you're left with no sense of what is and what is not. And I felt like, Armand, you're talking about yourself. You're the one that affects things to the point where people don't know what is real or not. And he's done that. He's done that to the person that's interviewing them right now, Daniel. And so I wonder if Daniel's what is going in that character's mind when this occurs. And also, those shots of the trial when all the characters, I love the camera work, I love the director. Um, when they're like getting like a close-up shot of each character, and these characters between um what do you call it? Santiago, Louis, Claudia, Lestat, they're all trying to figure out who's manipulating an audience. And then the camera swoops to Armand, and it seems like it's Armand who's the one that's saving Louis. I love that camera work because I did not believe it for a moment. It's just too sweeping, it's too dramatic. It reminds me of like something you would see like a hero do. And I just felt like that's such an incredible example physically. I mean, not physically, visually, of us seeing something and us getting tipped off as an audience that this is not real, that this is not real. Um, and speaking of gaslighting, when Lestat totally flips on Louis about the narrative of their budding relationship, as Louis was the pursuer with the come to me, that had me so upset. That had me so upset. I definitely felt like that was just messed up. I think the psychology of it from Lestat's point of view is, first of all, he is lying. I'm not saying he's not lying. I think he's lying because he was the one saying, come to me. But I also think part of him doing that is kind of saying, like, well, I know what um, Louis really wanted, what he really yearned for as a human, because he was using his vampiric powers to kind of get an idea of like the inner workings and the yearning from Louis. So, because he could read his mind, right? While he was pursuing, I know, like, oh, hey, this guy he actually does want me. Maybe he might not know it yet. But you know what? I think that's another conversation. Well, first of all, that was all the way wrong. And I understood like what he was thinking, but it's still wrong. We like as humans, we have all sorts of thoughts, feelings, and desires, but we don't actually always act on them. And that's also what I wanted to discuss in terms of like consent. Just because you meet someone and they're like, it reminded me of the whole like your mouth says no, but your body language says yes. I would just I was getting, like, so upset about that and just, like, the flip of who was pursuing who because I feel like Lestat's lying to himself there. I don't know, but let me know what you think about that particular point. There's also a moment in the, story on the trial where Lestat says something like, um he talks about how Claudia stepped into the sun, that's yet or she was harming herself, which we saw in season 1. But my question is, how would he know that? Does this specifically have to do with the diaries? Because Claudia self-harmed? So unless oh, I guess she just wrote it in the diaries. I don't know. I just feel like there's something up there that bothers me. But that's another moment that we see that, like, even Claudia's privacy just time and time again gets violated. And the whole idea that Claudia's how do I say this? That Claudia's body count in the past when she just like was heartbroken and started unaliving all those people, the fact that it's used against her here is wild because what do we see in the future happen in San Francisco is that Louis is unwell and he basically goes like on this um serial killer spree, right? In that apartment that he's at in San Francisco. And it's just like, since we're talking about a fictional vampire world, it's not okay for Claudia to do that, but it's okay for Louis. It just felt so hypocritical in hindsight for what us, the audience, knows now. But yeah, I could go on and on about what didn't make sense, didn't match up in the trial, but I can tell you that first time when I watched it, I was all the way just so engrossed in it and just like frustrated because Lestat did have some points. I get it, but yeah, some of it was definitely like skewed a bit. And so now we're gonna move to number 3, which is Claudia's haunting promise. And I'm so glad that Claudia had this moment because I felt it as a viewer. Like this is we cannot change what's about to happen to her, but I want her to have this. This is someone that has so much willpower to persevere, which gets me so upset because isn't that what these vampires want from a companion? Is that someone that's going to endure? And the one that I think that's would endure, I guess, the most or transition well through enduring through time would be Claudia. But you know, she gets screwed over and over again. But I love this moment. I love that she wants to make sure she sees every single audience member and she's like, "I don't know how I'm gonna do it, but I'm gonna haunt you." And not only that, but when she sits down for that moment, I feel like when they're showing Madeline, there's this, like, sadness, but also, like, this proud like, she's proud of Claudia in that moment that um, her existence will not be bound to just, like, a physical human or vampiric form. She's like, "You guys could, like, put me down as much you could try to put me down into existence. I will overcome that." And that was like the most badass thing. And I loved her more for it. Um Number 3. Did I mark these right? Hold on. Oh, I was supposed to put number 4. Let's pretend this is number 4, okay? Oh, I totally forgot. Claudia is her coven. I love that through all this, there's so many emotions running high during this episode and so much dread that I like that this was a moment where Madeline chooses Claudia and says like, she's my coven, she's my world. Claudia has had a whole lifetime of people making decisions for them and not choosing her, using her completely like a rag doll. And I just felt like some sort of like glimmer. I don't know what to call it. Happiness. I don't know because I was so distraught by this point that someone finally chose her. You know, I mean, Madeline's choosing her in so many different ways, but in this moment, if it's do or die, she's like, I choose Claudia. And I get that there's a whole idea that someone may think that like, oh well, would you wouldn't want to be a part of this coven, right? If they're threatening to unalive your companion. But that's not true because we see that Santiago, we don't know his backstory, but we do know that Santiago chose the coven over being unalived with their companion. So we see that Madeline has more integrity, more loyalty to Claudia in her middle finger than Santiago has in his entire body. And so this was just like a really another badass moment. And both these moments, this moment and Claudia going off on the audience, reminded me of what Madeline has said to Claudia in at her store, at her shop, sorry, dressmaker shop, which is like, if you feel like going boom, go boom. So this is them going boom. All right, that was number 4, and I totally messed up and put number 3, but we're gonna move on to 5, and that's gonna be singing as a form of protest. Now, this is the last one, and I'm gonna be all over the place with this, so hopefully I won't lose the thread of this conversation. But this is from episode 2, early on, when Louis talks about going to Paris, and there was like a little bit of a sense of relief of leaving America and leaving like that brand of racism behind. And he's kind of like defending what he's saying to Daniel. And so what does he say? He goes, I just, it's just the idea of like when I arrive, I don't have to blow a trumpet. I don't have to sing for my supper. I was just grateful knowing no one wanted to lynch me. But what happens to Claudia? What happens to both of them, but also what happens to Claudia? One is Claudia goes to Paris with him, and she is so desperately wants to be accepted by these people that have vampire pride, unlike Louis, that she performs. She sings, she performs, and I feel like it's really I guess I don't know what the words I don't know, not humiliating. I just feel like it's another way that they're putting her down. And on top of that, before even that moment happened, even when she's like in the hazing phase, I already didn't like that. There's like a moment where Armand stops by Louis and Claudia's apartment and she looks down because he tells her to. I already didn't like that. That was already like immediately bothered me, and I'm annoyed that Louis was okay with it. I mean, like later on, he tries to like say something at the museum, but it's just like it just always bothered me. And then also seeing her interactions while she's being hazed and seeing her look down, it just didn't it just didn't settle right with me. So that was already like really bothering me. And then also while Claudia is performing, what is she doing? Her character is having to play this like two-dimensional baby bird character, and then for every performance she's being like violently unalived, and like this white audience is just like chewing it up. And by the way, they all speak, most of the performances are with English, and then I think they said that they actually added performances in French too. So you have to think about like, except for like, who is the audience, um and what's a takeaway, what is entertaining about a little black girl doing this. And then my second to last point is that um, what really drove home singing as a form of protest is also seeing that Madeline, Louis, and Claudia all have their ankles slashed. And I first saw that in a trailer clip before the episode came out. And that already stressed me. That already took the wind out of me from seeing that, because my mind couldn't help but go to like just a history of um, Black people being enslaved in America, and just like the atrocities that were done on their bodies in order to subjugate them. And so that was just like that was just hard. I can't stop saying it. It was just really, really hard that they went there with their characters. And what does Louis say during the trial? That they were put there like props, like furniture. And I also think that's also very like a clear connection with being like dehumanized. And so leading up to all of this, this really made me think about how Claudia knows that they're gonna unalive her and Madeline. So when that happens, she starts singing the "My Baby," how's it go? "My Baby Likes Windows" song, and I felt like in that moment, I felt like that's another form of her holding on to her strength and being like, "I'm not gonna choose despair." Like she's using all her willpower and strength not to choose despair in this moment. And so when she's like holding on to Madeline as she dies before her, she just keeps singing. And I felt that was a form of protest. That was like the first knee jerk emotion, emotional reaction that came to my mind when I saw that. But if I'm wrong, let me know what you think. But that's just where my mind went. And I also bring that up because, like in America during like in times of like enslavement, when it was legal, that's what people would do. And it wasn't necessarily just about morale. It's about dreaming for your survival. It's perseverance. It's thinking that something can happen that the world is telling you cannot. And going off that, that reminded me of a book. There's what do you call it? There's an anthology science fiction collection, and it's in the vein of Octavia E. Butler's writing, and it's called Octavia's Brood. And oh, actually, let me take this away so I can show you for a minute. Here we go. Okay, so here's Octavia's Brood: Science Fiction Stories from Social Justice Movements, edited by Adrienne Marie Brown and Walida Imarisha. And I kind of was thinking about song inform the protests when I was, I was thinking about this book when I was kind of like thinking about that. And so there's an introduction, and in the introduction, Wadila Imarisha says in the intro, she goes, "Because all organizing is science fiction, we're dreaming new worlds every time we think about the changes we want to make in the world. And for those of us from communities with historic collective trauma, we must understand that each of us is already science fiction walking around on two legs. Our ancestors dreamed us up and then bent reality to create us." And I felt like that's one of my favorite quotes from this book. And this book is incredible if you haven't read it. But also, I felt like that encompasses Claudia choosing singing as a form of protest, but also her promise to haunt those that have wronged her. I feel like that's an act of science fiction. That's an act of perseverance. That's an act of everyone else is telling me no, but I'm going to make that no a yes. And so I just found that like incredibly powerful and fierce. And Lestat and Louis and Armand, I don't care. They all should be ashamed of themselves. And I hope that Claudia haunts them for the rest of their lives. So yeah, that's basically the end of my top five. I will say that there are a couple of other accounts that I've watched this week that I felt like did a created really beautiful, in-depth dialogue regarding what happened during the trial, and kind of like what I'm talking about in my the fifth of my top five. And so I'll go ahead and I'll put them in the details, or I'll put them in like in the chat section. Yeah, I'll figure out, and I'll plop it in there in case you're interested. So I wanted to kind of end this with talking about some questions that I have. I don't have the answers. I just lots of questions. And so what do you think they did with Madeline and Claudia's ashes? What do you think is going to happen with Daniel in episode 8? How does Louis and Armand's relationship end? And what part of the trial is real and what isn't to you? Like, what part stuck out to you as like so clearly not real? So what they did with the ashes, I don't know. What's gonna happen to Daniel? I still kind of feel like he's gonna become a vampire. I just don't know, like in what way. Is it gonna be because Louis and Armand break up and it's not let's say not amicable? They're clearly gonna get into it, but is it more of a thing of like Louis is like, I want to be on my own, and we all know eventually he wants to get to Lestat, but Armand needs someone to be with him, or is it the other way around? Or is Daniel Malloy just going to outright ask for it because he's like, I just heard this whole story, and I still feel like how I did in San Fran. You are wasting this gift. Um, or part of it, I don't think it would be Armand, even though we saw Armand in episode 5, taking a little sip and playing with Daniel's body. I kind of feel like it might be Louis. Like maybe he'll get pushed too much by Daniel. Even though he is at a point where he's starting to take responsibility for what happened. I wonder if he might like accidentally lash out, feel bad, and then ask Armand to turn him. I don't know. And what part of the trial is real or not real? I still have a lot of questions. I definitely think that the way that we see Lestat, like everybody keeps saying like how how great the suit is, the hair is done, everything. I definitely feel like that's not real. And we are seeing a story told not just from Armand's point of no, not just Louis' point of view, but also Armand's. So that makes me think that these are two people that idealize Lestat in this way, and that's wild that they both see him this way because I don't think that's how he actually looked during the trial. And I look forward to that being explored next season. And I hesitate to say that, maybe put an asterisk next to that because I don't want to have to see Claudia get burnt up again. I don't want to have to see her getting burnt up again. That was a lot. And also, if you're still recovering from this episode, go check out Watch With Me ELLEBEE. They have a YouTube channel, and I'm telling you, every time they review a television show, it actually makes me feel better. And I don't know how, but she managed to recap this episode and make me laugh because this was so traumatizing. But yeah, that's all I have to say about this episode. I hope you're recovering nicely, and I also hope to have a discussion with you this Sunday. I watched the episode starting at 6, and so I have like a little live watch party to chat. I put myself on mute, so we're just doing the chat, and then right when the episode's over, then I just go ahead and just continue the live and talk with everyone for about an hour just to discuss how horrified I am from what's happened. All right, everyone, I love you, and I'll see you in the chat.